Hello folks, this is a first for me. This is where I'm going to try my level best to capture the journey of sculpting a piece from start to finish. I haven't done this before, so if it doesn't work quite as well as I'd hoped, you're going to have to forgive me for that. I'm usually pretty poor at documenting the processes. I usually forget to take lots of pictures, let alone setting up a film camera, but here we are. And this is to sculpt Yuna, which is a fantastic lioness from the big cat sanctuary. She was recently rescued from the war in Ukraine, and I'll add a little bit more to that further down the line once we get underway. I'm literally going to be starting any time now. Put my hand in this bag of clay and getting on with it. This is a very simple armature. I always go with something like this. This is because I never really know where I'm going with the piece. I like to have the freedom to change something, and I think if you have your armatures too rigid, you often have to finish a piece that maybe isn't quite as you like. I don't really want to do that. Usually I make a piece up as I'm going, and I'm certainly going to try and do it with Yuna, even though she is actually a real living lioness. But yeah, instead of me just carrying on, let's get going and talk to you guys later. Literally, you're just at this stage, just grabbing the clay out of a bag, you're wrestling it, you're just about to get as much clay on the armature as you can, as quickly as you can. It is air dry clay, so it does tend to dry out. I use that in my favour though, because when it dries out, it gets stiffer. When it gets stiffer, it means it also helps with the armature I've got. The armature is quite strong, but not that strong. So it needs an element of both to make it work. I think at this point, we should go to Dan's music, so that you don't have to listen to my breathing and groaning maybe, when I'll just get stuck into it at this stage. Talk to you later, folks. I will say though that when you're throwing clay on, literally you can't beat your hands just to get it on there. I am trying to sort of like guess, I guess, where it's going. There is an element to that. I know that that's not always the case. If you've got a working maquette, then it's a little bit more mathematical, that you're constantly measuring it. But not in this instance. In this instance, it's chuck it on, throw it on, see where it goes. This is an armature I use for, it's like a floating chin. What it means is that I can throw it into the piece and it holds the weight. Initially, I can move it around. At this stage, nothing I'm putting in is going to be committed. I'm literally getting the body of clay on it, but it works. It's got a loop in it. It means when it does start harden off, it won't sag, but it's useful. I thought it best to add a little background to just how it came to be that I am actually sculpting Yuna, the lioness. Back in 2024, Cam Whitnell, managing director of the Big Cat Sanctuary, received a distressing message. 5 lions were suffering amid the devastating war in Ukraine. One of those lions was Yuna, a young lioness confined to a tiny 3 by 4 metre concrete cell. Day after day, she lived in near darkness, surrounded by the deafening wail of sirens and the concussive force of missile strikes. The relentless bombardment left her deeply traumatised, her body weakened, her spirit shaken. When rescues finally reached her,
Yuna was concussed and so severely effective she could barely stand, let alone walk. Every movement was slow and painful, her muscles stiff from the years of neglect and her nerves shattered by terror. What made her story even more heartbreaking was her age, still young, with so much life ahead of her, yet robbed of the playfulness and freedom a lioness should have known. She had never felt grass beneath her paws, never basked freely in the sun, and never known space to roam. Her rescue was not about saving a life, it was about restoring a dignity, giving her the chance to heal, and revealing to the world the hidden toll of human conflict on innocent creatures. Yuna, along with Rory, Vanda, Amani and Lyra, were victims of the illegal pet trade, neglected, abandoned and displaced. Cam and the Big Cat Sanctuary responded with urgency, launching the Big Cats in Crisis campaign in May 2024. And the campaign raised over £500,000 to fund their evacuation, provide veterinary care and construct a purpose-built rescue centre in Kent. In March 2025, all 5 lions finally arrived at their forever home in Smarden. It was an emotional moment. For the first time they felt grass under their paws, breathed the clean air of freedom and stepped into a new life of safety and care.
Right, so even though it is an actual lioness and humour, I am looking at Yuna's picture, so she has got features that I'm bearing in mind. You might not be seeing them at this stage at all, but I'm bearing them in mind so that when I do start to commit, I can change and facilitate where necessary to try and get that look. She's got such a beautiful face, really has, very charismatic. I literally just went to check to make sure I pressed the record button. This is, as I said, this is a very new, a new challenge, I guess, for me. So I'm just sitting there. I was silently putting some clay on, and it just dawned on me to check, but I was recording it. So thank goodness for that. One thing is with what I'm trying to ultimately achieve is that I want it to, of course, look well, as much as accurately as I can, just like Yuna. But it's also very much going to be a stylised edge sculpture piece as well. So there are certain points where I'm bearing it in mind at this point where I'm going to be putting a lot of line work and some structural edge work in there, no pun intended, but you know, I mean literally, where I'm going to put slices and things and really start to get it having that sort of notchy, primitive looking rock look to it maybe. But yeah, so that's what I'm doing. So in a minute, still putting material on. But that's the ultimate aim. I'm just using the water because even though I want the clay to stiffen up so that it holds the piece together, because I'm nowhere near with the amount of work I have to put into it, so I've got to go back into it. I don't want it to dry out too much. It's more difficult bringing it back then. Obviously when I'm, well not obviously, but when I'm further down the line with it, and I've secured more detail, then that's fine to let it go harder. But at this stage, you just want to keep it pretty fresh, really, pretty wet. Well, now I've got a lot of the weight on the piece, and it's still, well, it's still in its infancy. I've got to start really marking it all up, what I want to take off, add on, just to give myself some sort of target, really, with how to go about going into the, not finishing phase of the piece, but parts of the piece that I'm more likely going to stick with. Everything I put on now, anything at this stage can move. Nothing is staying at the minute. You know, I might have sketched the nose in, but that's not the actual nose. I'm just basically looking at it. I mean, I've had to lift this profile up. I've got to trim lots off here, so lots to do, but I'm going to start marking it up. The piece will actually chisel in a lot. It'll sharpen up. It'll almost deflate almost, because at the minute with such a lot of wet clay, it has quite a swollen look to it. That's just the fact I just wanted to throw weight on. So yeah, yeah, next phase it is. I am at this point looking at two things. I'm trying to get a accuracy in terms of anatomy, but at the same token, I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to be putting these sort of like geometrically edgy markers in, all the stylistics in there, without taking away the organic look of the piece. So it's a weird one because you're working almost against yourself in a sense, but yeah, it's a process. I have to do with everything. After I down tools yesterday, I sort of started having another look and marking it up, which I do quite regularly. You think you've got to a point, and then you start having a look, and then you get lost into it a little bit. So that's what I did yesterday. So I was just started to refine where I was going a little bit, so you can see the difference from working from where I have been on that one side. I started sketching up an eye there, and you can see the difference. This is obviously where I started throwing the clay on with my hands, which is basically just roughly, but you can see how far out it is. But that happens every time I do a piece. That's fine. It's only a case of moving it, really. So the trickiest thing is symmetry with pieces. Honestly, it's the hardest thing to do. You get one side of a sculpt and you like it, and then the other half is, it takes so much longer. Well, it does for me. Maybe there's artists out there that disagree, but no. And it doesn't really matter whether it's this big or a small figurine out of wax. It's the same thing. Oh well, I think it is. Same problem. It's a really testing problem as well. Trust me. It can really mess with your brain because you constantly, the reason I was kneeling on the floor is I was looking up at the piece. Well, at some point I'll be lowering this to another level and working from the top. And even if you think, for instance, you've got the eyes in the right place, invariably you'll start doing all these checks and they won't be quite as even as you think. And that's the thing, the problem is real life isn't actually completely symmetrical either, but when you sculpt things, you get that inherently anyway because it's hand sculpted, but you're trying to keep it even. It's difficult to make things odd on purpose because your mind doesn't really want to do it. And the one thing I would say about sculpting really is don't be afraid just to make a mess and throw stuff on, because you can always go backwards, add on, cut off if you really don't like it. As long as you've got a good idea in your head of what you're aiming to do with the piece, then that's the main thing. Go with your hunches. If you don't, in other words, if you just stick with a route where something isn't working, you know, it'll never actually ever get better. It'll just basically drive you insane. Also, I'm using basically a very small dental tool, really. So I know that, you know, the pieces are small, it's not super huge, not small. I don't tend to use a lot of tools. I mean, I have them, but I tend to use them, well, they're not very good, that is. I tend to use them at the end, really, or once I know where it's going. Most of the time, I'm just using this like I would, I don't know, pencil or anything. I'm just constantly whittling it away. You know, there are tools that I can use if I really need to take a lot of weight out, scoop stuff out, which I will once I get going. But essentially, I use the same tools all the time.
I really hope you have enjoyed watching the sculpting process so far for Yuna the Lioness, and I'll be continuing the creative journey with her in part 2 and part 3.